So, Binance founder CZ just got pardoned by Donald Trump, and once again, America's plea bargaining system is in the spotlight. For many Chinese viewers, it's baffling. How can someone simply confess and walk free? How can a company pay a fine and erase a criminal case? To the Chinese mind, where law and morality often intertwine, this feels almost unthinkable. Isn't that just a more polished form of corruption? Not exactly. To understand this, we need to unpack how the plea bargaining system actually works and why it's not seen that way at all in America, but not in China. Plea bargaining isn't just a courtroom shortcut or a lawyer's trick. It's part of America's legal DNA, a mirror of how the US defines the relationship between the state and the individual. Historically, it traces back to Britain's shift from the divine right of kings to the social contract. Under divine rule, justice flowed from God's will. Punishment wasn't negotiated, it was decreed. But as sacred hierarchy gave way to a contractual vision of power, law began to look less like divine command and more like mutual agreement. The courtroom, once an altar of judgment, turned into a space of negotiation, where justice, efficiency, and individual choice all pull against each other. Now, ideally, the state and the defendant act like two rational players, each trying to minimize risk, cost, and uncertainty. So the question stopped being, what's the truth, and turned into, what's your best offer? Then came the Chicago School, a generation of economists who saw the legal system not as a moral institution, but as a marketplace of incentives. Thinkers like Gary Becker and Richard Posner applied cost-benefit analysis to everything from theft to sentencing. To them, criminals, prosecutors, and even judges were rational agents responding to prices, probabilities, and payoffs. In this view, a plea deal wasn't moral compromise. It was efficient allocation. The system didn't seek absolute justice. It sought equilibrium. Justice became something you could measure, negotiate, and sometimes even discount. By the mid-20th century, over 90% of U.S. criminal cases were resolved through plea deals. Now here's the key question. Why doesn't China have plea bargaining? The short answer, because the two systems are built on different foundations. In the United States, justice operates through a contractual framework. Power is divided. Prosecutors, judges, and defense lawyers are formally independent actors in an adversarial system. They negotiate, compromise, and leverage procedural rules, with resolutions seen as a product of competing interests. In China, justice is formally structured with separate roles. Prosecutors, courts, and defense have defined functions, yet the system emphasizes the state's authority and social order. Prosecutors act as representatives of public power. Courts uphold that authority while adjudicating, and leniency is granted primarily as a measure of state-guided compliance rather than negotiated compromise. So justice here isn't something you can trade. It isn't a bargaining chip across the table. In China, the idea of justice has never been transactional. Historically, there existed a simple notion of an eye for an eye in China, a moral balance deeply tied to order and retribution. The spirit behind it remains. It embodied a moral balance, a rule that linked wrongdoing to proportionate retribution. As modern law no longer embraces such literal symmetry, the underlying logic persists. The state must uphold justice, ensuring order and fairness. It also implied that justice was the state's responsibility. Punishment was to be executed through public authority, not by individuals acting on their own. That's why the Chinese legal system doesn't logically permit plea bargaining. Because justice isn't an asset one can negotiate. It's a public trust that the state must safeguard.